Ever heard the story of the demons and the pigs? The one where a wild man meets Jesus and suddenly, boom, 2,000 pigs plummet off a cliff? Most of us brush past it. Scary demon story, move on. But today, I'm blowing the lid off that narrative. Why did those demons beg Jesus to enter the pigs? Was it chaos or a desperate cry for mercy? What if their plea exposed a truth the Gospels don't spell out? Stick around, because this isn't just a ghost story. It's a window into the spiritual war you're in right now. And by the end of this video, you'll see this story not as a random miracle, but as a revealing clue about Jesus' authority, the nature of evil, and why the enemy fights so hard to hide it. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. Those demons weren't just bad guys. They were terrified. And their plea to Jesus? It wasn't just about destruction. It was a last-ditch plea for survival. That's the shocker we're unpacking. To understand this story, we need to rewind to Mark 5:1-20. The setting? The Decapolis, a region of 10 Gentile cities, far from Jerusalem, where unclean spirits and pagan gods reigned. Here, a man with an unclean spirit lives among the tombs, cutting himself, howling day and night. The locals? They've chained him, but he breaks free 7 times. This isn't just a crazy guy story. This is a spiritual prison break. And Jesus isn't just passing through. He's here to confront the source, a legion of demons. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Let's meet the villain. Legion. That's what the demons call themselves. Legion meaning thousands. Why thousands? Because this wasn't a single demon. It was a corporate force of evil entrenched in that man's life. And they're not just causing chaos, they're protecting their territory. The tombs? A hotbed for pagan rituals, a place where the dead and their spirits lingered. This man? He's a walking portal for evil. But here's the twist. When Jesus steps off the boat, the demons flee the man and plead with him. "Send us into the pigs," they beg. Why pigs? Pigs were unclean to Jews, but to Gentiles? A delicacy. This wasn't random. It was a calculated move. The demons knew exactly what would happen next. Now, stop. Let's pause right there. Why would demons, creatures of chaos and torment, ask for permission? Isn't that backwards? Shouldn't they be the ones commanding, attacking, overwhelming? Yet here they are, begging. That one detail should blow your mind, because what it reveals is something few dare to teach. These beings, as malevolent as they are, know who's in charge. Not just spiritually, but cosmically. They know they're outmatched, and it terrifies them. They weren't just asking to go into pigs, they were asking to avoid the abyss. In Luke's version of this story, they explicitly beg Jesus not to send them into the deep. That's not just poetic language, it's a theological time bomb. The abyss, Tartarus, Sheol, the bottomless pit, is the destined prison for demonic forces. So when Jesus shows up, they don't launch an attack. They plead for time. Let that sink in. The darkest forces of hell know their time is short, and Jesus is the clock. Here's the shocking truth. Those demons didn't beg Jesus to enter the pigs because they liked pigs. They begged him to spare them from destruction. Think of it like a battlefield. Only one side knows the war's already lost. The demons saw Jesus not as a healer, not as a teacher, but as the judge, the executioner, the one with the authority to send them into eternal punishment. So they made a move, a tactical retreat disguised as a relocation, and they chose pigs. For a reason. To the Jewish people, pigs were the ultimate symbol of defilement. In the law of Moses, pigs were labeled unclean, not just for eating, but for contact. But in Gentile regions, like the Decapolis, pigs were just another farm animal, profitable, plentiful, and completely normal. The demons knew that. They weren't just looking for bodies, they were looking for cover. Possessing pigs gave them a way to remain in the physical realm without being cast into judgment. It was camouflage, survival, strategy. But Jesus isn't fooled. When he says go, he's not surrendering to their plan. He's detonating it. The pigs don't wander off. They rush, as if driven by a violent force, into the sea, off the cliffs. 2,000 of them, screaming, drowning, and suddenly the demons are unmasked. This wasn't just about deliverance, it was a public spectacle, a cosmic mic drop. Jesus wanted the watching world to see what had just happened, to witness the result of demonic influence. Not in shadows, not in whispers, but in daylight, in front of an entire town. And what happens next? The townspeople come running. They see the man who had been possessed, calm, clothed, in his right mind. And what do? They rejoice, right? Nope. They freak out, they're terrified, and they beg Jesus to leave. Think about that. One man, tortured for years, set free in an instant, and the town responds with fear. Why? Because they weren't just witnessing a miracle. They were witnessing a confrontation, a collision between kingdoms. They saw their livestock, their economy, destroyed. They saw their worldview flipped. And deep down, they knew. If Jesus has authority over demons, he has authority over them too. And that's uncomfortable, because authority demands a response. You can't witness power like that and remain neutral. You either surrender, or you ask it to leave. But not everyone does. The man who had been possessed, he doesn't beg Jesus to leave, he begs to follow him. Can you imagine that moment? A man who had lived naked, chained, bleeding, howling among the dead, now clothed, peaceful, and pleading to walk with the one who restored him. But Jesus says something unexpected. He tells him, "Go home. Tell your friends what the Lord has done for you." Why? Because this man, this former outcast, becomes the first evangelist to the Gentiles. Before Paul, before Peter, this man becomes a living testimony to Jesus' authority and mercy. His story isn't sanitized or polished, it's raw, it's real, and that's exactly what made it powerful. Think about what that means. The very moment hell lost its grip on him, heaven gave him a mission. Now, here's where it gets deeper. In Jewish thought, the sea was often a symbol of chaos, untamed, dark, dangerous. It was where monsters lived, Leviathan, the deep. So when those pigs drown, it's not just livestock loss, it's symbolic. Evil was cast back into chaos. Jesus was restoring order, taking what was chaotic and making it whole. And when he heals that man, he's not just cleansing a person, he's reclaiming territory. This wasn't Jewish land, it was Gentile, pagan, spiritually hostile land, and Jesus shows up like he owns it, because he does. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't sneak in. He walks in like a king, and demons beg for mercy. That's the power we're talking about. Now, let's bring this home. Why did the demons beg Jesus for pigs? Because they knew their time was up. Because they feared what he could do. Because even evil knows who holds the real power. This wasn't about pigs. It was about a cosmic courtroom. Jesus as the judge, the demons as the accused, and their desperate plea for a loophole. But there's something else, something even more terrifying to those demons than the abyss. Exposure. Demons thrive in secrecy, in deception, in subtlety. Their power lies in convincing you they're not real, or not dangerous, or not interested in you. But in this moment, Jesus strips them bare. He names them. He outs them. He reveals their tactics. And then he sends them into a herd of pigs that go screaming into the sea. It's not just a miracle. It's a warning. To every spiritual power, to every principality, to every shadow that thinks it can hide in the dark. Jesus is not just a healer. He's a warrior. And he came to reclaim what was stolen. The man freed from Legion? That's you. That's me. We may not live among tombs, but we've battled chains, regrets, addictions, cycles, voices. And for many, it's felt like there's no way out, like the darkness is just who you are. But then, Jesus steps ashore. He doesn't flinch at your mess. He doesn't retreat at your worst. He walks straight into your brokenness and speaks with authority, not as a therapist, not as a teacher, as Lord. And the forces that once held you, they have to flee. That's the shocker we miss. Because in our modern mindset, we often reduce spiritual warfare to metaphor. I'm battling my demons, we say, meaning bad habits or mental struggles. And yes, there's a psychological component. But this story? It reminds us, there's more going on than what we see. Evil is real. The spiritual realm is active. And Jesus, He's not just your Savior, He's your commander. He doesn't negotiate with darkness. He drives it out. Now, go back to the man healed. What does Jesus tell him to do? Go home. Tell them what God has done for you. That's your job, too. You don't need a theology degree. You don't need a platform. You need a story. And if Jesus has delivered you from anything, you have one. You are living proof that darkness doesn't win, that chains can break, that the Prince of Peace still speaks into storms, and they obey. So the next time you hear that story, the one about the pigs and the cliff and the screaming, you'll know the truth. You'll know that it wasn't just a strange miracle tucked away in the Gospels. It was a battle report, a reminder that when Jesus steps onto enemy ground, demons tremble, that evil flees, and that even the most hopeless cases, tomb dwellers, screamers, chain breakers, can become missionaries. Because Jesus doesn't just save people, He sends them. So what about you? What tomb have you been living in? What chains have you tried to break, but couldn't? What voices still echo in your soul, telling you you'll never be free? You don't need a legion's name to call it out. You just need to know His name and speak it. Because the same Jesus who cast out 2,000 demons walks into your life too. He doesn't bring fear. He brings fire. And with one word, He can flip your story, from possessed to preacher, from hopeless to healed, from bound in kursa to bold. So say the name, not in fear, in faith, Jesus, Jesus. That name isn't just a label, it's a weapon. It's the name that made Legion tremble, the name that made pigs run, the name that silences storms and raises the dead. It's the name above every name. And if you belong to Him, that power flows through you. That's not spiritual hype, that's spiritual truth. Because the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead now lives in you. That means you don't have to fear darkness. You confront it. You don't hide from warfare. You're equipped for it. And when the enemy tries to whisper lies, when it tells you you're worthless, bound, broken, too far gone, you can stand and say, I know the one who silenced a legion, and He calls me free. This story isn't a children's tale. It's a war briefing. It teaches us that spiritual authority doesn't come from shouting. It doesn't come from rituals. It comes from proximity to Jesus. The demons didn't tremble because the man was strong. They trembled because Jesus showed up. And here's the raw truth. Many of us are still battling tombs, old pain, hidden shame, secret sins. We've learned to live with the chains, to normalize the screams. But Jesus didn't come to make you comfortable in your chaos. He came to conquer it. He came to walk into your graveyard and say, this ends today. But don't miss this. Deliverance wasn't the end of that man's story. It was the beginning. Because when you get free, you get sent. The man begged to go with Jesus, but Jesus sent him back home. Why? Because your testimony is God's strategy. Jesus didn't need him to preach sermons. He just needed him to share his story. To say, I was possessed. Now I'm whole. And the one who did it is coming for you, too. And He did. Scripture says the man went to the Decapolis, all 10 Gentile cities, and everyone marveled. One encounter, one testimony, and an entire region shook. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be free and willing to speak. Because someone else is living in tombs right now, waiting for your story to find them. So, what do we take away from this? First, evil is real. Don't ignore it. Don't mock it. Don't romanticize it. Recognize it. Call it out. And trust that Jesus is stronger. Second, Jesus doesn't back down. He doesn't avoid hard places. He seeks them out. He didn't avoid the Gentile region. He chose it. Why? Because no place is too dark for his light. Third, you are never too far gone. That man had legion inside him, thousands of spirits, generations of torment, and in one encounter, it was over. If he did it for him, he can do it for you. And last, your freedom has a purpose. You're not delivered to sit silently. You're delivered to declare the glory of the one who rescued you. You are not just a survivor, you are a soldier. So walk in that. Speak with authority. And remember this story, not just for the spectacle, but for the strategy. When Jesus shows up, hell trembles. When he speaks, darkness obeys. And when he sends, nations hear. Let that be your legacy. Let that be your legacy. Not a legacy of silence, not a legacy of hiding your scars, but a legacy of boldness, of testimony, of light breaking into darkness. Because when Jesus saved that man, he didn't just rescue a soul, he launched a movement. Picture this. A formerly naked, demon-tormented man walks into a Gentile village, clothed, speaking clearly, eyes steady. And he says, "I met a man named Jesus. He saw me in the tombs. He wasn't afraid. He didn't shame me. He spoke, and the torment fled. And now, I'm whole." What do you do with a testimony like that? You listen, because you can't argue with transformation. And friend, that's what you carry. Not just facts, not just theology, but proof, evidence that grace is real, that freedom is possible, that even the darkest story can turn into a declaration of glory. Now, let's flip the lens. Let's look at the pigs again. Those 2,000 unclean, snorting creatures that became the hosts of a demonic exodus. Why did they matter? Because they were the cost of freedom. Freedom always costs something. In this case, it was a herd of pigs. But in your case, it might be your pride, your comfort, a relationship, a habit, a mindset. Deliverance doesn't come cheap, but it's always worth it. Jesus was willing to let an entire economy crash to save one man. Let that hit. He'll disrupt a system. He'll stir up a city. He'll confront cultural norms just to reach you. Because to Jesus, one soul is worth more than 2,000 pigs, more than a hillside, more than reputation, more than peace with the locals. That's love. Radical, reckless, all-consuming love. And you might think, well, I'm not possessed. I'm not living in a graveyard. This doesn't apply to me. But what if you're wrong? What if you've normalized your tomb? What if you've been listening to lies for so long they sound like your own voice? What if you've mistaken survival for freedom? You don't have to be screaming and chained to be bound. Some of the most spiritual-looking people are still fighting unseen battles, still silenced by shame, still tormented by things they don't even understand. But Jesus knows. He sees the root. He knows the stronghold. And he doesn't just treat symptoms. He casts out the source. If you'll let him. So maybe today is the day you stop running. Stop pretending. Stop coping. And you just say it. Jesus, I need you to speak into my chaos. He will. He's still walking into graveyards. Still setting captives free. Still sending people into cities to shake the gates of hell with nothing but their story. And maybe that's what this video is for. Maybe this is your moment. Not just to hear a wild story, but to realize it's your story. Because if demons begged for pigs to avoid Jesus' power, what makes you think your bondage can stand against it? It can't. The same voice that said, "Go" to Legion can say peace to your soul, but only if you ask. So ask, and believe. Because here's the deeper mystery most people miss. The pigs weren't the demon's destination. They were a detour, a last-minute lifeline before judgment. And even that, Jesus allowed. Why? Because his power is absolute, but his timing is precise. He exposed the demons, then let the town see the result. Not so they'd panic, but so they'd wake up. Wake up to the war around them. Wake up to the unseen forces affecting their lives. Wake up to the one who holds dominion over it all. And some did. That former demoniac sure did. But others? They sent Jesus away. Too much disruption, too much loss, too much truth. And isn't that still true today? People would rather protect pigs than confront power. They'd rather guard their economy than release a man from torment. They'd rather stay in control than surrender to a king. But Jesus doesn't stay where he's not welcomed. He'll step into your storm, speak to your demons, walk into your chaos. But if you push him away, he'll leave. Not because he's cruel, but because love never forces itself. So here's the question. Will you ask him to stay? Will you make room for deliverance even if it costs you your comfort? Because that's what real transformation requires. A letting go, a giving up of what's normal so you can receive what's holy. The man from the tombs, he gave up everything, his hiding place, his identity, his control, and in return, he received a new name, a new mind, a new mission. That's the gospel. Jesus didn't just remove demons, he restored destiny, and he's still doing it. But you've got to make a choice. Don't be like the crowd, clutching their pigs and begging Jesus to leave. Be like the healed man saying, "Take me with you." Even if he says no, even if he sends you back into your hometown, your workplace, your community, you go. Because your story is a sword. Your scars are not shame. They are signs of victory. And your voice, once silenced by darkness, now speaks light. So open your mouth, speak. Tell them what the Lord has done for you, not what you've achieved, not what you've learned, what he's done. Because that's the testimony that terrifies hell. Not polished speeches, not Instagram quotes, but raw, real, resurrected you. You were bound. Now you're free. You were lost. Now you're found. You were tormented. Now you're at peace. Tell that story, and watch what God does with it. Because when one man told the truth in the Decapolis, 10 cities trembled. 10 cities trembled because one man dared to speak. So what about your city, your school, your circle of friends? You may not see yourself as an evangelist. You might not feel like a spiritual warrior. But if Jesus has delivered you, then you are already both. You carry what hell fears most. A life touched by the divine and a mouth willing to declare it. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the enemy has fought you so hard. Because your story carries weight. Not just to inspire, but to expose. To expose lies that have kept others in chains. To expose the tactics of an enemy who thrives in silence. To expose the counterfeit comfort of normal life apart from God. And let's not forget what Jesus said at the beginning of his ministry. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound." That's not just poetic, that's a job description. And it didn't end with Jesus, because when he left the tomb, he didn't say, "Cool, I'm done." He said, "Go. Go with the power I've given you. Go with the authority I've earned. Go with the story I've written across your life." And that's what this entire account in Mark 5 is about. It's not just about pigs. It's not even just about demons. It's about authority. Who has it? Who fears it? And who walks in it? The demons knew Jesus had it. The townspeople feared it. The healed man embraced it. Which group will you be in? Because this story is still happening. The battle hasn't ended. The tombs are still full. The voices are still screaming. And Jesus is still crossing the sea, still stepping onto your shore, still confronting your chains, not with condemnation, but with power. And he's looking for people who won't just be amazed by him, but who will follow him. People who won't just cheer the miracle, but will carry the message. People who won't just experience freedom, but will fight for others to find it too. So as this story comes to a close, let it start something in you. Let it ignite a fire. Let it stir a hunger. Let it plant a question in your soul that refuses to go unanswered. If Jesus has set me free, who needs to hear it? Go tell them. You don't need a pulpit. You need presence. You don't need permission. You already have the Great Commission. You don't need to wait. The moment is now, because somewhere in your life there's someone crying out among tombs, someone who's tried everything, someone who's chained to something invisible, someone who's almost given up, and your voice might be the first light they've seen in years. Don't hold it back. Jesus didn't set you free to stay silent. He set you free so your story could shout louder than the lies. So tell it. Tell it like your life depends on it. Because for someone else, it just might. That's how the kingdom advances, not through megaphones, but through testimonies, through ordinary people with extraordinary stories, through tomb walkers turned truth-tellers, through the once possessed becoming the now purposed. And don't wait until you have it all together. That's a lie straight from the pit. The man in Mark 5 didn't wait for seminary. He didn't wait for a platform. He didn't even wait for understanding. He just went, with the only thing he had, his experience of Jesus. And that was enough. It still is. So here's the invitation. If you're still living in a spiritual graveyard, call on Jesus. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. His authority hasn't changed. His compassion hasn't faded. His power hasn't weakened. One word from him, and legion flees. But if you've already been delivered, then it's time to deliver the message. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't water it down. Don't apologize for it. Just tell it, and let God do what only He can do. Because when truth is spoken from a heart that's been set free, it carries anointing, it carries weight, it carries authority, and demons still tremble at that sound. So, as we close, I want to ask you one more time. Where are your tombs? Where have you allowed darkness to stay too long? Where have you accepted survival instead of freedom? And what are you going to do with the voice God gave you once He breaks the chains? Don't let this story just be ancient history. Make it your story. Let it reframe how you see Jesus, not just as a gentle teacher but as a conquering king, a spiritual liberator, a savior who walks where no one else dares, and calls out what everyone else ignores. The pigs, the cliff, the drowning, the calm, none of it was accidental. It was a divine demonstration, a declaration, a foreshadowing of what Jesus would do at the cross, storming enemy territory, confronting death itself, and making a public spectacle of the powers of darkness. He didn't come to play nice with evil. He came to crush it, and He still does. So, whether you're in chains or carrying the keys, remember this. There's a war going on, but the victory is already decided. The enemy may roar, but he's on a leash. And Jesus? He's still speaking, still sending, still saving. So tell the story, until the tombs are empty, until the pigs run again, until the whole world knows. Jesus is Lord.